Hello and welcome to another episode of Quickies with Angela and Caity.
I'm Angela Dawn of Authentic Heart Coaching. I'm a tantric sex coach and I help couples get closer.
And I'm Caity Wilkinson of Caity Coaches. I'm a sex, love, and relationship coach, and I can help you bring more pleasure to your partnership by bringing more pleasure to yourself. Instead of a regular special guest for this episode, today the tables are turned for Angela, my co-host, because I will be interviewing her and her Tantra partner, Dan.
We sure came up with something novel for this episode, Caity. When we were talking about who our next guest would be, you suggested Dan, which got me thinking, like Dan could talk about so many different things with us. He's trained in Taoist practices, Qigong, tantric sexuality, breath work. So narrowing down a topic with him was going to be a little tricky. And then I thought to myself, wait, our listeners might want to hear about our relationship.
Do you hear that, everybody? We are going to feed your inner warrior today. I am thrilled to get the discussion going here with you two. Welcome to Quickies, Dan.
It's a pleasure to be here. It's fun after listening to so many episodes that now I get to be a part of one. It's kind of surreal.
Behind the scenes. So to start off, I would love to hear, how did you two meet?
Okay, so that's a really good story, Caity. I'm glad you asked me that because it was kind of a long time coming. You and I were in the coaching program, I think already with Layla Martin. So I was already kind of like following Tantra coaches and really kind of getting interested in the field. And across my Facebook comes a post about Dan's book. I'm going to mention your book, huh?
It's called the Manifesto for Authentic Masculinity. And it was, in that pre-COVID era where a lot of headlines were about the toxic masculine. And I just felt like we needed to have a conversation within that about what we feel like authentic masculinity is, rather than just focusing on the toxic counterpart.
Yeah, so I saw Dan's post about his book, and I was like, what? There's a Tantra coach in my town that just wrote this book. So I sent him a friend request, and that was that. It was just like connecting professionally to, learn more about what Dan was up to. And then I was with another coach in our program, actually two other coaches at an outdoor dance event because it was during COVID. So, you couldn't be inside. So we were out at a park in DC dancing, and I saw Dan at the dance party. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's that coach that lives in my town. And we weren't in our town, we were in DC. So that was kind of funny, but he was deep in conversation. Like I could see he was kind of helping somebody at the time. So I didn't want to interrupt, and I let it go. And then as part of our coaching program, Caity, so much inner work was part of that. And I had been doing some inner work to get over a relationship that had ended, and finished working through all that and really understood what I wanted in relationship. And I put that out there to the universe on an app. And within 24 hours of me putting that out to universe on an app, I got a ping, and it was Dan.
I know you like to say that you called in Dan in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah.
24 hours is impressive.
Within 24 hours. Yeah. So I help my clients do that now. I'm like, oh, let me help you write uh, the perfect dating profile because I know how to do it.
And from my perspective, I had just gotten a friend request one day and was just at that same event. And I had no idea Angela was at that same event. So, around the time that those things were happening, I was in a different, very long-term relationship that was just starting to like open up. And so I had really just started my journey into ethical non-monogamy at that point. And starting that field profile was a part of that process. And well, I would just say that Angela very much stood out, being this tantric practitioner with all this experience in Tibetan Buddhism, who's like 1 or 2 miles away from me, who just happens to be utterly gorgeous. Uh, was compelling. And so that's it's kind of all she wrote.
Angela, did you buy his book?
I did. I bought it on Kindle. And I wanted to, check it out and see if it was something to recommend to some of my clients. Yeah.
So I'm a little bit more seriously here. I'm curious what initially attracted you to each other. And is that what still attracts you to each other, or has that expanded over time as your partnership has continued to evolve?
Well, I mean, I think Dan's hot. So, like that's, there's that baseline sort of physical attraction piece, Caity. And also, I loved that he knew about Tantra, that he'd done his own learning in that arena. That's not something that's necessarily easy to come by. I loved just, his presence, and that he was such a, good listener and thoughtful and intelligent, and yeah, those are all things that still attract me today.
Yeah, I, could say a lot of the same things. I obviously there's the baseline physical attraction. I think Angela's beautiful in every way. Um, the fact that, we haven't studied all the same things, but we've both been on a path for long enough to have a, deep and enriching human experience that we've reflected on. She clearly cares so much about the people in her life, and she's wicked smart, as Will Hunting would say. There's so much that I love about Angela, and I think I still love the same things about Angela. That's very much true, but I feel like as I've gotten to know her and kind of like understand how she works, that my it's become more kaleidoscopic over time. Like the things that I'm attracted to about her have just grown in depth and nuance.
I love that you said kaleidoscopic because I think, Angela, you're, at least on one of your business cards, I've seen like this kind of kaleidoscope image there. It feels very appropriate, kind of. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, something that makes your relationship especially interesting is that you are both coaches. So, what happens when two love professionals partner together? What's that been like?
I would say that, having studied a lot of different things, Qigong, shamanism, coaching, breath work, for me, when I think about what pays the most dividends with my clients, for instance, it's my capacity to receive breath and be as present as possible with them, to hear the words that are being said between the words that are actually being said, and really just experiencing a deeper this experience of the moment with them. And I think that's exactly the same. That quality of presence deepens our relationship.
Mm.
That capacity to listen to each other, to hear each other, to speak to the subtle experiences that we're having and what we can feel in our body and our hearts, and being willing to share whatever thoughts that are coming up for us. To me, I think that's what makes the most difference when I think about the skills of being a practitioner and how that actually applies to us being in relationship.
That's a beautiful explanation. And that's something that I've heard so many women say that they're hungry for in male partnership in particular.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For sure. For sure. Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm always talking to couples about. A lot of what we talk to men about in our pussy whispering class, right?
Listening.
It's listening, but it's not just listening. It's actually being present and being able to hold space. And that's a lot of my background, as Dan mentioned, was in Tibetan Buddhism. So I had tons and tons and tons and tons of hours sitting on a cushion. That is what I was doing, for, 10 or 15 years, tons of retreats. And I think, that was great in terms of, preparation for relationship. And then the work that we did to become coaches, Caity, there was, the first third of the program was all inner work. And if I hadn't done that inner work, I wouldn't have known exactly what I wanted to be able to call in Dan, right? I wouldn't have been prepared to be in relationship with someone like him if I hadn't done that work myself too. So I think that's how it works when you're both coaches. You've done the inner work, and it's not like it ends, when you finish your program or whatever, like it's still happening. But and I think, my relationship with Dan has allowed me to be a better coach, from learning to be a better partner as well.
That's so beautiful. So you two are in a tantric partnership. Dan, how would you define tantric partnership for anybody who's not familiar?
It's funny because I don't find myself using that term a whole lot. Like when I describe Angela, I call her my partner, not my Tantra partner, but there's definitely like a distinct set of qualities, that are there that make our partnership tantric, which, I think is really just like the depth of the moments that we share with each other and this kind of like easeful serendipity that we can be in. Like honestly, like it's not about, to me, it's not about like making sure we practice like sitting formally, like looking into each other's eyes and like circulating energy like in certain ways. For me, it's like a lot of that stuff happens spontaneously because we're embodied. Like we're like brushing our teeth before bed and we end up eye gazing just because we're there like with each other, kind of like, wow, I get to be with this person in this moment and we're both God. That's pretty awesome. Yeah, to me, that's what it is it's like the recognition that we're both manifestations of the sacred and we get to be that with each other and be aware of it and be conscious of it and support each other in the flourishing and flowering of our creativity and who we really are as people and be engaged with the mystery of who we are as people. Like I would be a fool if I woke up every day thinking that Angela was the same person, right? It's like, ooh, you're a mystery. Like, who are you today?
Which Angela?
I don't want to limit the possibility of who you are. And I don't think you would want to limit that for me either.
No, definitely not. Yeah, I think Dan's right in that it's about, embodying the principles. And I talk a lot with people who are unfamiliar with Tantra. I talk about one translation of the word Tantra is to weave. And it's about really weaving your whole self together, right? Like not cutting out any parts and, valuing what there is to learn or to gain from each part of who you are. And then also being able to do that with your partner, like seeing them as a whole entity and not rejecting, not kind of choosing what you like about them. It's like accepting all of them.
In both of your opinions, what are the main ingredients of a tantric partnership? What makes it tantric, and where does a person start if they're brand new to this lifestyle?
Yeah, so I'm going to jump right in this. Open communication. I mean, that is where I begin for my couples workshops. That's where I begin with private sessions. I always take couples through communication exercises, because you really have to be able to share with your partner about how you feel and really share, like with no filter or really almost no filter. I can tell you that I spent a lot of time in previous relationships thinking about how what I was feeling might impact my partner if they knew, or how they might feel if I shared my true feelings with them, right? So this kind of like worry about fallout, repercussions, that kind of worry can make you hesitant to share your truth with your partner. And I'm telling you, I see this with couples all the time. It is so rare that at least both partners are comfortable really sharing what's on their mind with no filter with each other. And what I learned, like by being in relationship with Dan, was that he was going to hold space for my truth. He was going to really listen to what I had to say. He was going to listen to me talk about my feelings. And the key piece here is that he wasn't going to judge what I was feeling as right or wrong. So, it's this like two-way street of communication. Like he makes me feel safe and I share, right? And it wasn't like some kind of switch flipped and I was like ready to share off the bat. No, I came into this relationship with like the same issues I came into other relationships with, right? To some degree. And it took a lot of courage for me to start like walking the talk, right? For me to start really like sharing with Dan in this way. And like then I could begin to see, oh, I've already shared with Dan in this way, and now I know it's safe to share the next thing with him, right? Or to share more fully with him because I had these like consistent experiences of sharing and having it be okay, and not just okay, right? Like not just like he held space and said it was fine for me to feel that way. It was us growing closer, like in a spiral, right? Because like I dare to be honest and he listens and meets me where I am and supports me. And it was just like this upward spiral. And we got closer because I dared to be honest with him.
Knowing you, that doesn't surprise me. And it really disappoints me how many couples don't realize that by that unwillingness to be truly vulnerable with each other and to really be seen from all parts of you, they're cutting themselves off from that deeper connection that they're, everybody's hungry for that.
Yeah. I mean, it's conditioning, but
It is, but it's so sad.
Yeah.
Now, Dan, can you speak to the safety aspect that Angela just mentioned? She took risks to share her truth, but she could do that because you made her feel safe first. And in your opinion, how can somebody create that level of safety for their partner so that that partner can feel that they're able to be radically truthful?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's nuanced because it involves a lot of inner work in the moment, this presence to what's happening in one's own experience, as well as being present to what's happening in their partner's experience, sort of like a two-way sensitivity. Because obviously, if Angela's sharing something that's coming up for her and involves some heavy emotions, there are lots of different ways that I, as her partner, could experience that. And I could experience it as being like my fault or something that I have to fix, or that I'm to blame for this or that. And that could make me defensive. It could make me want to try to fix her situation. And none of those things are really helpful, truly. Like none of those things are like of the utmost called for. So really depersonalizing it to a certain extent, like getting out of our own head about what's being said and bearing witness to it as this unfolding of reality that doesn't have anything to do with like my own feelings of like blame or shame, because that's not close to the reality that's unfolding. This is really about bearing witness to my partner in their experience. And so if we as listeners for our partners can hold ourselves with as much compassion as we're holding our partner and learn to discern, between our own feelings of insecurity that can come up and the reality of what's coming up for our partner, then we can detangle really severe misunderstandings sometimes that can take place, and trust can develop and connection can happen and love can flow more smoothly.
Right.
And safety is a byproduct of all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Beautifully said.
So, when I'm leading workshops and sessions with couples and they're doing these tantric communication exercises, Caity, it's really practice for doing this kind of space holding with your partner. Um, it's practice so that you can go deep later, right? I find that many couples, like even couples have been together for decades, they don't have practice with this kind of sharing and listening, right? And being present. And in workshops, there's always at least one person who's crying, and crying in a good way, right? Because it's the first time they really shared their heart this way with their partner. I remember it was actually one of the very first Tantra workshops that I did. It was like a sensual connection workshop, but we did a communication exercise first, and there was a married couple. And afterwards they were telling me about what the experience was like sharing in this communication exercise. And they were like, we are in the kitchen talking to each other every day, but we have never talked to each other like this. And these are people that had been married over a decade, had kids together, and had a great relationship. There was nothing wrong with their relationship. It's just they had never allowed for that level of depth. And so if you come to do private work with me, or you come on the retreat, or you come to a workshop, you're going to get that practice. And what ends up happening is it changes the way that you like talk to your kids. It changes the way you interact with everybody in your household, but you have to have someone teach you how to do that, unless you grew up in some kind of community where this was demonstrated. We haven't seen it. We haven't seen it. Our parents didn't communicate this way.
Yeah,
Very
and
few people
having
are
done
able to grow up in that kind of community.
Yeah.
That really would be such a gift.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and having done like our fair share of work, like if we were just in our own bubble, Angela and I, we express how much we love each other so much and compliment each other and have such authenticity with our feelings and our emotions that it's sometimes like it's sort of a shock when we, get back around like a client or, like other people whose energy is so contracted, and the contrast can be like shocking, where you can forget like, oh wow, like a lot of people, just even people who, like Angela was talking about, have been married for a really long time, or have kids, or whose lives are very enmeshed with each other, they can struggle just saying something as simple as "I love you."
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it just points to how much progress can be made with the work in a fairly short period of time, because I think something more fundamental to who and what we are is that we're love, and that's our true nature. And so when we return to it, it feels like returning home.
Mm.
I love the wording you used there for that contracted energy. Like I could feel that as you spoke it. And I mean it makes sense because that's the opposite of the openness that we're encouraging people to explore. The openness with that vulnerability and that connecting from your heart space.
Hmm.
Yeah. And yeah, the contrast is there sometimes working with clients. And then sometimes when Dan and I are out in public, we went to a
Yeah.
concert, and this woman like passed by us a couple times and then stopped and said, you all have what basically like you all have what I aspire to have. Like, and we didn't know her from Adam, right? It was
We
just
didn't
like,
exchange any words besides that. It was like
mm,
an all an energy thing. And then there was somebody else at some other event that said that we were an inspiration.
mhm.
It was a very sweet thing for a stranger to tell you.
Yeah. And so, we get that. Like, we just get strangers like coming up to us and saying that, but it's because we are interacting with each other in a certain way. We like Dan said, like we are being love when we're together, and that's just palpable.
People can
And
feel that.
yeah, yeah. And the thing is there's an easy way to start, Caity. And like this is what I want to tell our listeners. I often tell this to my couples clients. When you have a good thought about your partner in your head or your heart, start a practice of saying it out loud, like sharing it out loud. we're always thinking nice things about our partners, but that's all we're doing. We're thinking them. We're not saying them. You know, like you might be in the kitchen and look over and be like, oh, nice butt. Or just say it, say nice butt, right? Or like they prepared a nice dinner for you and like, oh my gosh, I love the way you take like what looks like nothing in the refrigerator and turn it into something beautiful. Or, you know, whatever is coming up, just say it. And it might seem really awkward at first, but over time it becomes second nature. And kind of like that's how Dan and I are all the time.
I love that, especially in relationships where the recipient of those words is very into words of affirmation. It's just another level of verbal safety and reassurance and such a romance-gasm. Over here swooning.
But we're both like words and touch, right?
I think for the most part.
So besides the huge pieces of listening and open sharing and giving lots of verbal affirmation, what else do you think are key components to building and maintaining the level of partnership that you have with each other?
I would say intentionality and intentionality of what kind of time we spend together, intentionality of around like what we do during that time. And like Dan is really good about that. Like, you know, if he feels like we've done too much like social, you know, he'll be like, we need to have some alone time, right? And if I, you know, if I feel like we haven't spent enough time in bed, I'm like, oh, we have to have a bed in.
I
Yeah.
know you
So
always talk about your bed-ins. They sound like these sexiest staycations.
yeah, I
Touch
think so.
time.
But yeah, I mean, time together, prioritizing it, scheduling it.
Yeah, we're both very ambitious people. And so, like, one of the things that tends to happen when we get together is we both get into this space of deep relaxation, just because, you know, Angela's very ambitious and type A and entrepreneurial, and I'm exactly the same way. And so we're always doing like 12 different things, and then we come together and it's just this decompression that can happen, this more full relaxation where it's like, we don't have that to-do list, you know, we just have each other and it sort of simplifies all of reality, really. Kind of like meditation practice. And yeah, the bed-ins are the perfect example of that. We're very intentional with our quality time. It makes it easier that we only live a couple of miles away from each other. But we're very intentional about getting together, and the bed-ins are similar because we've done them on kind of like a quarterly basis. But even today, Angela was like, when's the next bed-in? Oh, it's only
Get
a
that
few weeks
scheduled.
away. Okay, can make it till then. It's just an even deeper level of that letting go and that relaxation into nothingness, nothingness that everything happens in. I remember when I was working on The Artist's Way, Julia Cameron, who wrote that book, she says artists need time to do nothing. It's where they fill themselves back up. And I feel that's like the same for us. We end up doing a lot in our nothing time, but it's always really rejuvenating.
Yeah, I was just talking about the bed-in this morning because we have one planned in the not too distant future. And I was like, when was the last one? It feels like it's been too long. So we might need to make them more frequent than quarterly. But I do have like guidelines that I share with folks as like minimum amounts of time that you should be spending with each other to cultivate your relationship. And I've written about this on my AuthenticHeartCoach.com on the blog. My latest article in Brains Magazine is really about fostering connection, and it talks about this. So if you want to look it up, you can look it up there. We can put those links in the show notes. But I really want to emphasize for our listeners that what we're talking about here is quality time and having novel experiences together and putting down our phones as much as possible. Right. So going to a new place together, learning something new together. These are great ways to bond through like shared novel experiences. Oh, we've got a good one coming up, right? Like I've got an opportunity this summer in July to actually come down to Costa Rica and be with the two of us and have that kind of intentional experience at my Tantra retreat that I'm doing down near Nosara, and I really created that so couples could get away from those distractions of everyday life that really detract from connection, to provide them with a novel experience, right? Okay, so maybe they're going to Costa Rica for the first time, or maybe they're doing something new in Costa Rica they haven't done, right? So that novelty piece. And then to learn something new about how to relate to each other, right? Like letting me teach them about tantric techniques and practices, so doing something like the couples retreat that I'm offering this summer, it's really like a home run for couples because it hits what you need. You got the quality time, you've got the new things. It's just amazing. And in this case, if you come on this one, you get to be with me and Dan and pick our brains about our partnership.
Absolutely. And when it comes to experiences like this, it is fun, right? That's absolutely the case. But I think even more than that, it is investment in like people who participate in these types of retreats, it's investment in their relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It's investment, therefore, in like the quality of their life overall. Like, yeah, you could consider it a vacation, but it's really something that pays dividends down the road in so many ways, in the way that you communicate with each other, in the sex life, and all of it. And I've done plenty of these types of, retreats, for myself, getting my own training, and Angela and I create these types of experiences for ourselves and get so much value from them that I think it's amazing that, she's putting together this experience for other people so that they can step outside of their normal routine, which is necessary for growth to happen, to take a journey together and go into the wild unknown where they can discover that, yes, even more magic is possible in their partnership than they thought before.
Yeah. And something you were talking about, Dan, with like paying dividends through your whole life. I just completed a 10-session package with a local couple that was coming to see me in person. And a lot of the work on the retreat is going to be one-on-one, just with me, the couple and me. So it's just very much like the private coaching that I do here at home, and except in a cool place. So, but at the end, when I was asking them for feedback, they said they have a happier household because they did these sessions with me. And, people come to me thinking, oh, we're going to, work on our spark, we're going to improve our sex life. And the thing is, the dividends really do spread to your entire life. I've had clients say, oh, I'm a better manager because I worked with you. The way I am with my children is better because I worked with you. And so, yes, go and work on your partnership and you'll be surprised what else happens.
And I know we've talked about in other episodes too, just in general with this kind of personal development, relationship development, it really is global throughout your life. You pick one element to work on, it's going to spread, it's going to pay off. And I love the level of intentionality there. So good. So we know that it can be difficult for many partners to make time for each other in their relationship. Has it been easy for both of you to make time for each other, or is that something that you've had to work on?
I remember in the beginning, I had to ask for how much time I wanted.
Good for you for asking.
Yeah, right. That was a moment where I had to like screw up my courage and say, hey, I want more time, and yeah.
Yeah, there's a yes and, to that question. Like I think it's easy for us now because we've practiced and we've gotten to know, like what really works for us. During that time that Angela was talking about, I was sort of a non-monogamy newbie. So I had to really learn how to navigate multiple connections. And, our connection has become really primary in my life. And And so that was, a shift that happened kind of gradually over time. And um, I mean, it was always easy for me to make that time for Angela because I enjoy spending time with her so much. I think it gets harder when couples withhold from each other
Mhm.
and when they keep secrets and like all sorts of other things.
Mm.
But yeah, it's gotten easier for us over time, and now we're like old hat at it. We're like, oh yeah, like we needed a calendar, and
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
just a practice, and it's become more non-negotiable. When couples have problems actually making time for each other, I usually tell them like, make this a non-negotiable for you before you schedule anything else. Schedule a date night and don't compromise on it for anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, like I mentioned, like the guidelines I have for couples, minimum one date night a week, minimum one weekend together a season, and minimum one kind of big week-long trip a year. And we put those bed-ins on our calendar quarterly. And if something cool is happening, we don't cancel the bed-in. I mean, I have missed some huge things. Um, I can think of one family event that I missed that, I should have been there. I can think of like a birthday party that I might not be able to make because of this. And, it's me prioritizing. It's me saying we have this on the calendar and I am not going to let anything get in the way of it.
So you both named elements like open sharing, verbal affirmations, spending quality time together. But our people want to know, this is a sex podcast. What's the deal with sex in a tantric partnership? I have heard from Angela so many times that you both share an incredible sex life.
Okay.
And I'm putting you on the spot here.
um, I mean, sometimes we set aside time to do intentional work, right? Especially when I was still, working on my training. I was still developing some of the work that I was going to do with other couples. I would be like, Dan, this weekend we have to do XYZ practice, right? So like bringing in like specific practices sometimes. Yeah, I think we're really conscious of, our sensuality and like how we want to be with each other. And we make that a priority. But it's also really organic. Yeah.
Yeah, organic is a great word. Um, Yeah, kind of like I was saying earlier, it's not so much to me about like, oh, I must circulate energy in this specific way or whatever. It's really like listening to the moment and like being with each other that really dictates like how are we making love like in this moment, keeping your finger on the pulse, pun intended, of what's happening right now. Um, and so for me, like if I'm like surrendered to my breath, like I'm surrendered to the moment with Angela. And being surrendered in that way, we don't get caught in routines. There are things we like, but like we don't get caught in like the monotony of like, oh, this is how we do things. Like our sex could look really similar, from like one meeting to the next, but the experience of it will be completely unique because we're really there with each other. I'm not running baseball statistics in my head, which is like that was so weird to me when I like was first studying some of this stuff. Like, well, what do normal people do when they're trying to like last longer or whatever? I'm like, really? Times tables, baseball statistics? How are you going to be with your partner? Right. So we're
Hmm.
really there with each other in our
Hmm.
bodies, in our hearts, and in our minds. Not with distracting thoughts, but sometimes I've had like visions and stuff, like psychedelic type of things that have happened like when I've been making love with Angela. And it's really soulful for that type of transpersonal-esque experience to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. There have been some intense and beautiful and pleasurable energy experiences we've shared together. And I really think of like a lot. The best way I can think to describe our sex, Caity, is really primal. And like not primal in the sense that like, I'm the prey and Dan's chasing me around the bedroom. Like not that kind of primal. I mean like,
Hold on, I'm just visualizing that for a second.
well, people have an idea of what primal means. And like I think that that's in some people's minds. So I just wanted to clarify. I don't mean that, sort of like
Formative.
kink role play kind of primal. I mean primal in that we are so present that it's like, what is there? What is there? What is there? What is there in every moment that we're together?
That's so wholesome. Oh, yum. Okay, so you've listed excellent communication, quality time, amazing sex. Is there anything else that you feel really sets your relationship apart?
It's really interesting because in a lot of different respects, like being where we are, being who we are, it feels a little bit like we were tailor-made for each other in different respects. So like part of me wants to say like everything about our relationship sets our relationship apart. It's not like a cop out. It's like, we've had such similar experiences studying the things that we've studied. Um, we have an age difference, but the emotional maturity levels that we have are right on par, with each other. We're both like radically non-judgmental in the ways that we need to be in order to have the dynamic that we have. Um, there's so much that's there. It's difficult to really answer that question in kind of like a cut dry 1, 2, 3 sort of way. It's unlike any other relationship I've ever been in.
Me either. It's funny what Dan said because I was like, I don't know, divine providence. Like,
You're like, okay, here's the ABC. Here's my.
yeah, like it's just like I know like this goes all the way back to the beginning of this episode, Caity, when you said it sounds like you called Dan in. And I definitely have made the joke before that like roundabout when I was 18, I asked God for the right partner and he was like, I got you, but it's going to take a while. You know, and Dan had to be created just for me. Yeah, it just feels like that. It just feels like we're meant to be together right now. For sure. Mhm.
I really hope people are watching this in the video version and not just the audio, because Angela, I have never seen you light up like this before. We've recorded so many episodes, we've had so many Zoom calls together. You are absolutely glowing and radiant. And you have been since you both hopped on this call. It's really spectacular. So as we wrap up here, does anybody have any final closing thoughts or things that you'd like to share?
I do. Yeah. For anybody watching this who has really struggled in their love life, who's really struggled in their sex life, who might be like hearing some of the things that we're saying, distancing themselves from the possibility of having it for themselves. I just want them to hear and know that, we're effed up humans too. And that we were not born this way like Lady Gaga. Uh, we have had a lot of struggles ourselves, maybe not like as much with each other, but in the years leading up to our relationship. And so the only thing that's really between anyone listening to this and having anything that they've heard on this podcast is of the work. And I know it's a wilderness out there. Everybody's telling you what you need to be doing. And if you have any curiosity, Angela, Caity, they can hear you and they can know how to help you get more of what you want, get more of this type of connection and love and partnership. So yeah, that's all for me.
That was beautiful, Dan. I mean, it really is true. It really is true. Like I spoke to the work I had to do to be ready for Dan to show up in my life. And the universe was like, here he is. But yeah, it wasn't like, yeah, it took work. It took work. There's manifestation, there's continued growth. And that's really what it's about is, working on yourself, understanding what you want, and never stopping that continued unfolding of who you really are.
I love that you both are this really beautiful example of what's possible for people. Living proof that yes, anybody can have this too, if they're intentional, if they work towards building it.
Yeah.
So thank you both so much for your time here today. Dan for being our guest, Angela for role playing as a guest. And thank you both for being so willing to open up and share more about your partnership with our listeners and with me to be able to take this peek inside.
It was super fun.
It's been
Yeah.
a real pleasure. Thanks so much for the
Yeah.
invitation.
And that's all for this episode of Quickies with Angela and Caity. Thank you for listening, and you can follow us on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube.
And if you'd like more great information on sex, love, and relationships, be sure to follow us both on social media. On Instagram, I'm at Authentic Heart Coaching, and on the web, I'm AuthenticHeartCoach.com.
And you can find me on CaityCoaches.com as well as on Instagram at CaityCoaches.
And you all heard me talk in this episode about my Get Closer Tantra Couples Retreat that's happening July 2024 in Costa Rica. If you are ready to up-level your partnership, let's talk about the retreat. I have a couple of spots left to join Dan and me. So please do reach out and email me at angeladawn at AuthenticHeartCoach.com or DM me on social media. And we can set up a time to talk about whether the retreat is the right opportunity for you. I mean, it might be, it might not be, but like maybe this is the opportunity for you and your partner to level up. I also have some programs coming up in May in Annapolis. I have Massage for Him on May 5th, and also my signature Get Closer Couples Tantra workshop on May 19th. Last time the Tantra workshop sold out. So don't drag your feet if you want to come to that. In addition to my couples programs in May, last episode, I mentioned a new group coaching offer I have for mature women that I'll be running. So reach out to me about that as well, because it happens to be an opportunity to work with me at 1/3 of the cost of one-on-one coaching. So if you're a woman over 40, definitely give me a shout.
And we also have spectacular virtual classes available all about vulva pleasure, orgasms, sexual aliveness, and deep, passionate connection with your partner. So if that's interesting to you, check out our class bundle at pwclass.com. And with that said, we'll see you next time on Quickies with Angela and Caity.